Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do another top 5 video, but this time it's going to be a top 5 slasher villains top 5 list. So it's spooky season, of course, so I want to talk about, horror stuff, spooky stuff or whatever. So I want to talk about my top 5 favorite slasher villains. So this is going to be in pretty much in the top 5 order, but these are like my current top 5, and this is definitely subject to change because I am very inconsistent with my list of favorite slasher villains. I'm so inconsistent that most of the names on this list, it could be argued, are not even slasher villains. They're really just kind of horror slash spooky season antagonists, really. So yeah, I just kind of want to talk about my top 5 favorites, and I want to hear about your top 5 favorites. Let me know in the comments down below, what are your top 5 favorite slasher slash horror slash spooky season antagonists slash villains. So yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. But first, please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you'd like to support the channel in another way, you can check out the Patreon. The link is in the description. So with that being said, let's begin. All right, so I want to talk about my top 5 favorite ones. All of these come from movies, so I'm gonna, of course, talk a little bit about the movie as well. So let's get started with number 5. So number 5 on my list has to be Pinhead from the Hellraiser series. So I love Pinhead. I think he's one of the most fascinating like horror villains of the last like 50 years or so. And I think it's really, really cool the way like they're kind of presented as villains, but their explanation for what they are and stuff kind of means that they're not technically villains. They just kind of exist and occupy this eldritch space of like pain and pleasure and this like netherworld. Like it's as the movies continue, it kind of devolves into them being demons, but when it's initially started and stuff, and in the first book and stuff, you kind of understand that they are just, angels to some, demons to others, like the furthest explorers, explorers in the furthest reaches of pain and pleasure and whatever. I just love that concept. It's just so different. It's very eldritch horror like. It's very Lovecraftian in a lot of ways, but it has this kind of grounded nature, especially considering the time in which the first movie was made. It's very much soaking up a lot of that slasher energy, a lot of that like supernatural horror energy and stuff, and a lot of like religious horror imagery as well. So I just really love Pinhead. I think the backstory he gets in later movies is really interesting too, because this idea that these creatures were once human, but of course, solved the lament configuration and that kind of stuff, and just kept going and going and going until they eventually become one of these Cenobites. I just think that lore around it is pretty cool, and I haven't actually seen the reboot where they actually have a female Pinhead, because I believe in the books Pinhead is a female, so it's kind of interesting that they readapted it that way. But I haven't heard a lot about it since it came out, so I'm assuming it wasn't that great. Maybe it's just going to be another cult classic the way the original was. But yeah, either way, I just really like Pinhead. I love his design. I love how sophisticated he is. I love how creepy he is, and I love how he just kind of seems to have a sweet spot for the final girl in the first one, and I think like the second one. Like she just basically keeps opening the box and be like, "No, I don't want to go. Don't take me with you guys. I'm just trying to do something else." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So like I just really love the movies, and I really like the character. I think he's really cool. So number 4, this one is a little nebulous, but I'm definitely going to consider it a single antagonist. But it is Poltergeist. So I'm thinking more so the first Poltergeist movie and that main kind of monstrous ghost thing that comes down the stairs, and the main one that was essentially tempting Carol Ann to be, basically be able to be taken. So I really like that movie so much. I really like the energy of it. The idea of suburban haunted houses and stuff is really, really cool to me, because it is, of course, such a cliche that like most haunted houses are these old Victorian big manor houses and stuff. So I really like when we take a supernatural kind of ghost story to a suburban house like this, like a very clean cut neighborhood that you would only get good vibes from. So for it to just have all this insane activity, this ghost activity and stuff, is just a lot of fun. And the movie essentially is really subtle. Like when I first saw it, it was really giving me Exorcist vibes and stuff, the way it was just kind of a slow burn leading up to it. I mean, I guess it is still very much like Exorcist being a slow burn and then all hell breaks loose. But it kind of started off pretty subtle, and like the haunting part of it was subtle, and like it ramped up in a really creepy way and stuff with like everything that was happening with the portal opening and all this kind of stuff. But I didn't really expect it to get so outlandish with the giant creature like bursting bursting out of the stairs and stuff, even after we got all the other stuff going on in the movie. So when that happened, I was like, whoa, like this is just holding no punches. This is like full imagination land right here. I just thought it was so much fun and so cool. And that movie has stuck with me for years and years and years. So much so that I never even gave the reboot a chance. I never even watched it. Like if it's not that Toby Hooper, Steven Spielberg one, I am not interested at all. And I really just like that movie so much, and I really like the way in which they brought the poltergeist activity to life. So it's just a lot of fun, and it's a really cool setting, and I really enjoyed the movie a lot. So that's why Poltergeist has to be my number 4. All right, so number 3. Again, like I said, a lot of these aren't technically even slasher villains, but I think this one could be considered a slasher villain. So my my third favorite slasher / horror antagonist has to be Sam from Trick or Treat. So I love Trick or Treat. It's one of my favorite movies for this time of year, and we'll probably even be doing like a little watch along with it where I'll upload kind of a reaction type video to it, even though I've seen it a million times. But I really, really love this character, and I really love the movie. This idea of a personified like eldritch trick or treater being like the guardian of the rules of Halloween and stuff like that is just such a fun idea. It's such a cool concept that I'm surprised hasn't been touched on before. But the design also of Sam is just so perfect. Like I love the idea that he's like a small child-like thing, you know, going around trick-or-treating and stuff. He's very unassuming and stuff. But then when you take off the mask, the really cool mask that he has, but when you take it off, you see he's like made of pumpkin. He's like the like next generation of the pumpkin head demon or something like that. I thought it was really, really cool. And when he gets shot at and stuff, like the damage, when he takes damage, he just basically bleeds pumpkin seeds and pumpkin guts. I just think it's such a unique but exactly like hit the nail on the head kind of a thing that you will want in a movie like this, because this movie just absolutely drips Halloween atmosphere, and I just love it so much. It's one of my absolute favorite movies to watch every single year, and I love Sam so much. He's such a unique and fun character that they created, and I'm so happy that he's become this huge horror icon now. Like you can see the imagery of him all over the place, even though it's still rare to find somebody who's seen the movie. A lot of people know who Sam is but have never actually seen Trick or Treat. So I just think it's so cool that he transcends even the movie that he's in, and he's become one of the really, really cool horror icons of modern times. So I'm really excited about the character. I really love him. I almost want a sequel to the movie, but I'm terrified of them tarnishing what that first one was. So I'm like, just don't even touch it. Don't do anything with it. Let's just keep rewatching it over and over and over, kind of like A Christmas Story, even though they made a sequel to that and it was horrible. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, Sam from Trick or Treat is definitely my number 3. He's my third favorite horror / slasher kind of villain antagonist. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to number 2. So number 2 has to be one of the most iconic slasher villains in history. He's one of my absolute favorites. I've watched all his movies over and over and over again. He's one of my absolute favorite characters in fiction, and that has to be Freddy Krueger. So I love Freddy Krueger. I love the character. I used to be so utterly terrified of him. It wasn't until I was probably like 15 or 16 or something like that, some kind of switch just flipped in my head, and I just fell in love with horror movies and slasher movies and stuff. Before that, I was utterly terrified, and Freddy was one of the main ones I was completely terrified of. And it's hard to even pinpoint why I was so afraid, because I don't think even before that time I had truly sat down and watched any of the movies. I think the character was just so scary and the idea was so scary that it kind of had me locked in that place. But when I actually sat down and watched the movies, the first one is pretty scary, but it's so cool. Like as someone who eventually became a big cinephile, like a huge movie nerd, like I immediately fell in love with the way the movie was made. There were effects and things in the first Nightmare on Elm Street that I hadn't seen in a movie like that before. I thought was really, really cool. Like the arm, I still remember like how cool I thought his arm stretching and stuff was. I thought that was so incredible. And then the visual of his face pushing through the wall and like stretching reality and that kind of thing. I thought that was just so cool. And then eventually, like when I got through most of the series and I started to see like, you know, as the quality of course like went downhill like it does with all these slasher franchises, it started to just translate into humor for me. So as I kept going, so I then, you know, of course just like a lot of people, I started associating Freddy with comedy, and then he becomes like Uncle Freddy, and like he's not even scary at all. He's just like a beloved like family member or character creature or whatever. But it's so ironic considering of all the slasher villains, the big icons, he is one of the most despicable because of what he did as a human. Even though in the original series they just call him a child murderer, we're pretty sure it was a lot worse than that, and they just didn't, feel the need to be exploitative and have it be explicit. Kind of like the reboot made it fairly explicit. They even tried to keep it fairly subtle, but it was way more explicit in the reboot than it was in the original. But I just really love the franchise. I think Wes Craven did some incredible work with those movies, particularly the first one and like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which basically without we wouldn't have Scream. So it's just like it's so good, so iconic, so historic, and just so fun, so entertaining. And to this day, one of my absolute favorite movies in all existence is definitely Freddy versus Jason. But coming up close to that is Nightmare on Elm Street 3, I believe, Dream Warriors, or yeah, Dream Warriors is the third one. Or is it, yeah, because the fourth one is Dream Master. I really like that one. I really like Dream Warriors a lot because like just the concepts and everything they did, and it's just so cool, just so fun. Just I love it so much. It's such an iconic character and so well done by Robert Englund, and thanks to Wes Craven, we got just a great icon of the genre, and I'm really happy about it. So yeah, that's why he's my second favorite. So given that much praise, I wonder who will be my number one favorite. At least they're my number one for now. But before we hit to the number one, let's go through a couple honorable mentions, because I like to do honorable mentions, because I like to do top fives instead of top tens. So let's talk about some honorable mentions. All right, so first honorable mention has to be Pennywise from Stephen King's It. So this one in particular, I'm going to just like lump them all together. The book version, the Tim Curry TV miniseries version, and the new movie version, or the newer movie version with Bill Skarsgård. I love the character from top to bottom. Every iteration of the character has been fun and interesting in different ways, and it just is slightly disappointing. I mean, I understand it, but it's still slightly disappointing to me that nobody in any of these adaptations really dig into what Pennywise is, and it's really, really cool lore, but it's really hard to kind of exposit that information in a movie form without it detracting. And especially when the movies are so often like one-offs and they're not tied to the Dark Tower properly. So a lot of the context around what Pennywise is very, very hard to explain. But it's my favorite stuff. I love that Pennywise is an eldritch monster from the spaces in between universes. He's from the macro, or it's there from the macroverse, because the main incarnation of Pennywise is technically female because it lays eggs, but it's a shapeshifter to its core, so it technically has no real gender, and it's not in any way, shape, or form like life from this universe. So genderizing it is also weird, but whatever, which is why it kind of makes sense that it's just called It. And I just love it. I love what Stephen King did with it. I love that book. There's so much more also in the book than there ever really is in the movies, and it's just one of those really good ones that you can dig into for a really long time. And Pennywise is a really great character, and I really enjoyed him, but he's not that high up on the list because he spends so much time in other forms. So we don't really get to play with the eldritch monster of it all. So it's more just kind of a generic, children's fear kind of creature. So that's why he didn't make the top 5, but it's definitely one that would be on my top 10. So yeah, let's go to the next honorable mention. So next honorable mention has to be Chucky, or Charles Lee Ray. So I love Chucky. I love Chucky to death. Like, he should probably be on the top 5 list, but I can't really put it there because some of the movies were just so not good that I couldn't. But I love the idea, not really even the idea. I love what was done with the Chucky franchise more than I love pretty much any other slasher franchise. So the way in which Chucky has gone from like the first 2 movies, which are really good, really well received. The third movie, not very well received. Fourth movie completely changed the tone and everything with the movie. A little better received, but also kind of dismissed because of how funny and silly it was. Then the fifth one after that, even sillier, even stranger direction it went in. and got completely dismissed. But then the same creator continues to write the movies and make the movies, so he came back and leaned it back into proper horror. And then the two movies after that became really iconic to the point that a TV show was greenlit, and then we got 3 seasons of a TV show. And the really cool thing is Don Mancini, the creator and writer of Chucky and Child's Play and stuff, he somehow managed to make each season reflect the tone and tenor of each of the first 3 movies. So the first season of the TV show very much has the same energy of the first movie, and so on with the second season and the second movie, and the third with the third. Even though the third movie really has more energy. Actually, the second season is more Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, and the third season is more cult and, well, actually, that analogy kind of falls apart when I think about the actual events of the season. But tonally, I really do think that the first season mimics the first 2 movies, really, first movie, second movie, kind of. And the second season mimics the second movie as well as the third movie's tone. And then the third season really mimics the fourth movie's tone a lot. But I really just like the cohesive nature of the entire franchise. The fact that the main creator is stuck with it from jump all the way up until now, to the point where now the TV show has been canceled, but most of the fans like me are anticipating the announcement of another movie because Don Mancini will never let Chucky go. And there's just so much more story to be told based on the way the third season ended. So I just really love the character, and I really love the franchise, and I really love the way it's been used. I think the franchise itself deserves so much more credit because just its longevity and the fact that the entire quality of the entire franchise, every single movie and every TV show in the franchise has been nothing less than like a B minus. I'd say, like, there's been nothing that's just been absolute dog water, but like there's been some that aren't that great, but like the quality of it stays up pretty high. Nothing ever really gets to to Jason Takes Manhattan levels of just bad. It doesn't really ever get there. So for that reason, I really got to give the franchise a lot of credit. And it almost should be higher on the list. But again, it definitely has to stick as an honorable mention because the character of Chucky himself, I am not as enamored with as I am with the franchise. So that's why it is on the honorable mention list. So let's do one more honorable mention, then we'll go ahead and move on to our number 1. So last honorable mention definitely has to be Stephen King's Carrie. So I love Carrie. I love the idea of the character, and I love that 70s movie. I think it was Brian De Palma that made it. Like, I really love that movie a lot. But the character herself is just kind of, she's not as fun. She remains sad and despondent and kind of depressed throughout her entire story, which is kind of understandable. But like when she makes the heel turn, we don't really get the like play in that space that much. Like, she has her big revenge thing and everything, and she kills her mom and stuff, but we don't really get to play in the world of this character with these abilities. It's not as much fun when she has the potential that she does. So I love the story and I love the movie and I love the concepts around it, but the character herself is a little one note and not as not as well explored as I would like. So therefore she just pretty much has to sit as an honorable mention. Great book, great character, stood the test of time, still will probably be getting more reboots about that character in the future and changed up to, fit modern sensibilities yet again. And so she'll live forever, but she definitely just has to live on my honorable mention list. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump to number 1. So my absolute favorite slasher villain, my number 1, and I think this is pretty much like my universal number 1, regardless of a top 5 or top 10 or anything like that. My number 1 favorite slasher villain has to be Michael Myers. So I absolutely adore the Friday, God. I absolutely adore the Halloween franchise. It's probably my favorite slasher franchise out there. I love a good chunk of the movies. There's some movies in that latter half, like 4, 5, and 6, that are just not good. But I really love just the convoluted nature of the franchise also. The fact that there's 5 timelines and you can pick your favorite timeline and stuff. There's the initial timeline, which is all the movies including the Thorn trilogy, where they started to say Jason. They started to say Michael Myers is subject to an ancient witch's spell kind of a thing. And that timeline where it's pretty terrible. And then there's the slightly rebooted timeline with Halloween, Halloween 2, then Halloween H2O, and Halloween Resurrection. But then there's another timeline with the Rob Zombie reboots, which is Halloween 1 and 2. And then there's another timeline where it's only Halloween and then Halloween 2018 and then Halloween Ends and Halloween Kills. So there's just multiple timelines because these franchises had so many like restarts and stops and reboots and stuff. But the core of it is always Michael Myers. He is always the Shape. I love that there's like pretty much always some attempt to preserve what John Carpenter created in the 70s. Like he doesn't even give like the character a true name in the credits. He's credited as the Shape because Michael Myers is basically consumed by evil. He is evil. He is the walking personification of evil, and he has no humanity or no soul. He's not related to Laurie Strode or anything like that. He's just the Shape. He is the Shape of evil. And I really love that idea. It's like knocking on the door of Eldritch Monster while just being like a deep mystery and stuff like that, while just being this unknowable evil and stuff. So it's just really well done. I really love it. And I loved Halloween 2018. So at first it was just Halloween, Halloween 2, and then Halloween H2O. Those are the ones that I would acknowledge, and those are the ones that I really liked. And then 2018 came out, and I adore that movie. Oh, I adore it so much. It was a return to form in a way that I did not expect, and I was so incredibly excited about it and so happy and so satisfied with it. I loved it so, so much. It had all the subtlety and tension building and stuff that I love from the original, but just absolutely plussed. But then it just kind of, like what happens with all these slasher things, it just kind of falls apart. Halloween Kills is still kind of okay, but then Halloween Ends, I was like, oh, thank God it's over because this is so horrible. Like, it's so disrespectful to the character. I didn't like it at all. It just by the time Halloween Ends ended, I was happy for it to be over. But even though that new trilogy kind of ended on a terrible note, I really still love Michael Myers. I think he is one of the coolest, most absolutely iconic slasher villains out there. He is absolutely terrifying, unrelenting, and completely unstoppable. And that is why he is my number one favorite slasher horror villain slash antagonist. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. What are your top 5 favorite? Let me know who they are and what they come from and stuff. I'd really love to learn more about your favorites in the comments down below. So yeah, with that being said, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're interested in supporting the channel in another way, you can check out the Patreon. Over there, you can get early access and some art content where it's just me and real time painting and stuff, listening to podcasts and that kind of stuff. And yeah, so it's all kind of fun stuff over there, and I'm continuing to add more and more as we go. So yeah, please feel free to check that out. And as always, I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.